What's going on, everyone? It's Mitch from Respect My Region here with another episode of the RMR Podcast. Today, special guest Mario Guzman, aka Sherbinski. How you doing today, Mario?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate you coming on today, man. Every episode we kick off with our guest origin story around the plant being cannabis. So just kind of curious, whether it's personal, professional, a little bit of both. When you and cannabis kind of started your relationship together.
First relationship with cannabis, smoked a joint with my sister when I was around 11 or 12 years old on the side of my house. Didn't get me really high. Fast forward to high school, growing up in California, Northern California, I was just exposed to really good weed. And so, friends of friends, brothers, family, people in high school, older brothers that, there was always like good flower around. And so, I was blessed to grow up in California, and the rest is kind of got into growing when I moved to the Bay.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, like, what started kind of what started growing, and when did you really develop like an interest in like genetics and breeding?
When I saw kind of how simple and how difficult it is at the same time. And I just started playing around with seeds and, discovering things and reading. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And I learned that I did a really good job of, I didn't think so at the time, but, in terms of keeping records and notes, I was doing that like really early on. So I just fell in love with that process and getting people's reactions and, just having fun with it.
What's kind of was your early intention in terms of like coming up with new genetics or pheno-hunting? Like what was the, I guess, the inspiration initially? I'm sure it graduated a lot as you had a more appreciation for the plant and learned more, but that initial like dive into it, what kind of inspired that?
I mean, honestly, man, in the beginning, it was just to pay my bills, and I didn't look at it as a passion. I didn't look at it as, I didn't realize how the plant was going to speak to me, and I would, get this relationship that I have with it now. It was just pay my bills and put food on the table, and it quickly, evolved, as you said, into more.
And, before we get too much into it, I do got to give you your flowers. I'm not sure if I got a chance briefly when we rubbed shoulders in Chicago. But man, I mean, some of the genetics you're responsible for, I think, are of the last decade, plus, but especially this last decade, have been the most popular genetics for cannabis consumers, but I'd say also pop culture. If we look at the amount of references of strains from rappers, whether it's in interviews or actual songs, like your genetics or the things that have spawned off of your genetics, I'd say are like a clear winner, right? Like pre that, I know like OG Kush has been around forever and is still up there, but I'd say the last 10 years, I'd say Gelato and the subsidiaries of Gelato and Sherb, being Runts, Permanent Marker, some of these things that have been birthed from what came from you have been super impactful. What was the kind of the initial look when you were coming up with those original Sherb strains, kind of where you've derived, this moniker from? What was the goal when you started exploring those genetics or playing in that lane?
Before I get into that, shout out to Lil Wayne. If you guys haven't heard it, to the homie, his one of his songs is about a month old now. It's called Cat Food, but download that song. And Gelato is my favorite strain, and this was just, point being is I never paid for any marketing. I never went and gave out tons of weed to people. It just connected with the community and the culture. And it's interesting that even after all these years, Gelato in June is going to be 10 years old. So it's like there's been, it just keeps on going. The legacy is there, and it's I love seeing it still alive and well.
Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, the component I think of Gelato, right, I think comes obviously from the Sherb, right? Like if you like Gelato, you probably like Sherb, and if you like that flavor profile, again, that's what you find in Runts and Permanent Marker. And if we look at the strains of the years of these last decades,
Sherbert is the parent to Gelato.
Right, yeah.
So it's the people, it just kind of carried on that way, you know?
And that's where, like, for me, right, like anytime there's a cross that has Sherb in it and it's a prominent on that, I just feel like I'm personally gonna like it, right? Like I always have been, not to blow smoke up your skirt just because we're talking, but all the homies know
the world
like,
is already spoken, so
yeah.
we don't have to. World
if
spoken.
It's got some heavy Sherb, that's just like a flavor that just is like, it's so unique and just like it just.
When I first smoked it and I grew the first batch, and I remember sitting with a pound of it, and at this time, this was 13 years ago, 14 years ago, like a pound of Sherbert didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Imagine. And I remember sitting on my couch and like naming myself after it, because I was like, this is legacy shit.
Dang.
And it turned out to be, and I was like, how do I attach myself? And so to this day, Sherbinski, you know what I mean? Yeah. It created my whole name after it, but it's very medicinal. It's very uplifting. I've just time and time again, it's changed lives. So it's great medicine.
And I'm sure on that first smoke session, you were like, yo, I got it. Like, there's obviously something here. But what was that intent in getting to that? Like, what were you kind of hunting for that led you to that?
To make money, to have something special, to have something that's different, because everybody had OGs. There was like 10 different varieties of OGs. Master Kush, this OG Kush, and then the one cut, which was like the SFV basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was fetching 4 + 4 to 6, on the streets. And everything else, no matter what it would, the Asians got a hold of the Granddaddy Purple, and then that shit like went way down. And you know what I mean? And so it was like you had to have something special. And so when you love what you're doing, and then you're going through the hunt, how competitive it is. It's the top of the top competitiveness, and then you have something. And not even take away the word create. I have something that is like fucking really good. Then it's like, it's the feeling you get is like, wow. If there's breeders or there's growers or even when you do a really good batch, it's like that feeling you get when you're like, people are going to be stoked. I'm going to go and give this to my friends. And it's like something special,
And how long, obviously, like for genetics, obviously at this point, right, whether it's people buying seeds directly, bag seeds, people, running cuts of people shit out the back door, right? Like it's hard to contain a genetic, right? I look at it like in the music game, it's like sampling, but there's like laws and regulations in place to like enforce that and monetize that. Whereas cannabis, we don't, especially coming out of, 10, 12 years ago, this shit wasn't even really legal. So there was no legal framework really for anything past kind of this medical area. How was it like trying to, like, did you know when you had that? Obviously you built the brand off of that initial strain. Were you thinking of like, how do I protect this and also take it mainstream? Or is it kind of just that pursuit of like, I got something, let me try and make some money off it. And then it just kind of just grew from there?
I did real estate before I really got into this. And so I've always been, somewhat business minded, even early on. And so I always felt like turning it into a business was something, that I wanted to do, or just own businesses, period, whether it was cannabis or other businesses. I own other businesses. And so that's just always something like in the entrepreneurial spirit's always been in me since I was young. So this gave me a great opportunity. And what interested me so much early on is the potential to make great money, but how new it was that we were literally, laying the foundation brick by brick of like, how this is going to be done. What does it look like for somebody to grow weed in their garage or their warehouse? And what does it look like to go into a store that's never been done before? And what does it look like to sell that and create these relationships? And so it was exciting. I knew that we were pioneering something. And, there was some before us, but very few. And, I was in San Francisco in the late 90s, early 2000s, and all of this was just, blossoming. And it was an amazing time, to be honest with you. The Bay Area was amazing. The this was, mind you, there was no legal states in the U.S. Only California. Imagine, you know, being like, we're the only state that's like, hell yeah, Cali, we were the shit. And we had the best weed, and we were legal, and we were like pushing the envelope, and we were these pioneers. And look now, where almost the whole country is legal, you know, how many states are recreationally legal. So it was an amazing time, you know, and you fast forward to now, we're still fighting, we're still pushing, but the avalanche is already, you know, it's already come. And, you know, so that time was just can't say enough about just the excitement of being in that time and being able to, you know, meet the people and the old school guys that, you know, drove it forward, and then, you know, doing our part.
And on that tip, right, like California's influence on cannabis culture, right, it stretches back to like the 70s, right, and 80s, right, like the vibes of California. There's so many like cross references of just cannabis culture and California being kind of like the capital of that, if you will. How much of it was, when you were coming up, was kind of like community oriented, whether it's, you know, sharing, you know, those secrets or genetics grower to grower, and just being kind of near that epicenter, versus like just that competition, right? Of like, that's where a lot of heat was coming with. Like you said, if you wanted to stand out, the pressure was a lot higher in that environment, say, than if you're in Iowa, right? You could come a lot more mid and separate in the center of the country, versus like Cali, if you wanted to make a mark, like you had to make a mark.
Yeah. You know, first thing that comes to mind is like, shout out to like, I wasn't born there, but I spent 5 years growing in Mendocino, but Mendocino County, Humboldt County, the Emerald Triangle, really all the good weed was coming out of here, you know, for a long time, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And so me growing up in, you know, I graduated in 1994, you know, and so going back to the 90s, Humboldt was the shit. That's where all the good weed came from. And so there wasn't a lot of indoor grows at all. It's like, if you wanted good weed, it came from the hill. And you know, I always had a friend with an older brother and a Toyota pickup truck with a camper, and we'd roll up to Garberville and pull up to the gas station and look for the hippies. And then we'd be like, and then literally they'd just be like, what do you want? And if you wanted 100, if you wanted a box, if you wanted one, if you wanted a half pound, if you wanted a zip, you could get it. And it was an interesting time. And then we'd drive our 2 hours back to, you know, Roseville, where, you know, where I went to high school, and you were the shit. You know what I mean? And you like, it was a, you know, some dark parts of that, you know, because of all the people that got busted and went to jail and prison, and, you know, all of that side of it that changed when it got legal, you know, legal, but it definitely was a totally different time. And so it created it was a really high value for these things if you had like some fire. But, you know, let me, you know, get back to your point. Yeah, just from what you were saying, just Northern California, our culture. Did I answer your question, or was there a second part?
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of like what was, is it the community, you know, how much of it, I guess, is community versus like competition, right? That drives, I guess, the progress forward, or is it a mix of both?
At that time, and like let's just say when Sherbert came out and Gelato came out, it was everything, you know, like who had the best weed, who was like, just the hype of it. It was different. And again, when a lot less people have really good quality weed, it's different, right? Now everybody has a Gelato this, or a Skittles this, or a cross of this, like, you know, out there doing their brand and everything. But at that time, it didn't exist, you know. And so that's one side of it. But in terms of the community, so that competition, I guess where I was going is like, that drove it all, you know, because it was like, I mean, so that was always part of it. And there was always the community side of it too, you know, where I've always been the type to where I was always open arms, too much, you know, to where it was like, yo, we need to carry on the hippie spirit. We need to share, brother. You know, it was like, I come from that, you know, where I grew up in Sacramento, and I played drums and I learned how to drum in drum circles, and I hung out with hippies like from the Sacramento area that had sheets of acid and mushrooms, and back in the early 90s, 91, 92, 93. So I come from a community culture, you know, like the Grateful Dead was just in 1994 was their last show. Jerry died. But before that, there was a heavy Grateful Dead community that was just coming to an end, you know, but I got to go, you know, to the parking lot, not even the shows in Sacramento a couple times. And that community is like what went on to like create Burning Man and such. These people that were leading this shit, and then like people from San Francisco and Baker's Beach, and these people that had all the plugs and all the dope drugs and all the good weed. And when you speak of community, that's the deeper subculture community that's there. That's, you know, always you know, important in cannabis has been a huge part of that.
Yeah, and it's funny to hear, right, that has a place in your story, right? Because we look at all, you know, I've spent some time with like Chem Dog, right? And like his whole like essence, right, was derived from like the parking lots of Grateful Dead concerts, right? And there's been a lot of other, you especially look at like the East Coast and just how.
And I don't even know their history. I know somewhat in that time frame, but it speaks to the culture, you know.
Right,
of
right.
our time. And I caught that he's a little older than me, but I caught what that was about. And I met these people, and you know, you're looking for sheets of acid, and you meet some dude named Cricket, and he's like got some weird hat and like breaks out the best acid you've ever had in your fucking life, changes you and all your friends' lives. Facts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You come out of those sheets when they're all done and dispersed, you come out of it, you're different.
Yeah, that bro, that's hella fun. It's just thinking about that, the impact that Grateful Dead has had. It's on
this is facts.
Yeah,
this is facts. Well, I'm glad that it took this turn, because we could have a whole podcast like about that. Like when I was in high school, if you know, they would have all that on DAT. You guys probably don't even know about this, but like it was called DAT, like a little, but if you had the music, it was on DAT, and it was like having the masters basically of whatever, and then you could create cassettes off of the DAT. And so if you had a Grateful Dead cassette, this was 90s, early 90s, see sets, you couldn't go online and get it. You couldn't, if you didn't have the cassette, it wasn't, and a lot of these sets, like they were from DAT. And so the people that had the good weed, the good acid, the good drugs, the good everything else would have the good tapes and cassettes. And so there was a whole culture around that with the music that was like, people that know from that time, they know. It was so fucking sick, because you're doing all the acid, the mushrooms, you're in this lifestyle, and then you have that Grateful Dead take you to the fucking moon when you're high, and it's like gold. So that's why the Dead had so much swag, because they had the best drugs, they fucking threw the best concerts. But yeah, and especially Northern California and the Bay Area, and even now that I think about it, even the effects that they had in so many ways, you know.
Yeah, your plug was at the parking lot of the Grateful Dead concert.
Period. You're like, what? They're coming into town? You got tickets? Nope. And then you'd walk around and you'd be like, miracle, miracle. And then every once in a while, you'd see people just go give tickets to people. And so, yeah, it's cool. It was like a whole thing. Like, what's the miracle? What's that? And they'll be like, oh, that's just some hippie that's like high as shit and praying that someone's going to like think they're cool and give them a ticket. And then you see them hug and like, oh, and then they go on the show and they're like running around. Like it's a whole fucking thing. With a burrito, you could trade like a nug for a fucking vegan burrito. You could trade, you could get like, and then everyone's running around with balloons full of nitrous. That was a whole fucking another thing. And it was like, that was a thing. Balloons, burritos, fire at, and then you'd see some of the best weed you've ever seen. And it was expensive. And it was like, but I'd see weed be like, holy shit, this is, and you'd pick up an ounce and then you'd go back to your little homies and you'd be the shit for like a month or whatever until they smoked all of it. A week or whatever. It was like, you were the shit, you know? It's like, there was no access like we have now. I mean, that's the biggest difference, is like how the culture's changed. I mean, even this generation, everything's like, oh yeah, you got the fire, whatever, man. On my app, I get the fucking lemon cherry gelato. It shits on that. The boogie doogie do or whatever the fucking brand that bought some white, some cherry gelatos and stuffed it in their bag. And like this kid that's 19 and shit's getting it delivered to his fucking apartment, it's like a whole different thing. But it's safe access, so I do support it. In the change is like people have safe access now in a way that we didn't back then, which I've always advocated for, and is good.
Facts. No, it's definitely got diluted, right? Like I grew up like skateboarding, right, in the earlier 2000s, and when it was, when you rock shirts that were like skateboarding's not a crime, and now skateboarding's a fucking like Olympic sport, right? Like we've seen these transitions of things from subculture to mainstream, and there's a lot of pros and cons around that. On the theme of like the great, again, when I was talking to like Kim and like around the Grateful Dead and just bag seed, right? And I've talked to a couple of breeders up here in Seattle. Just the thought, I'm curious your thoughts on like, in terms of from a growing standpoint, like actual breeding genetics and bag seeds, right? Because I know there's a lot of genetics out there that are maybe claimed to be created by people. And I know a lot of people, again, I'm not a grower, so I can't speak with authority on that. But they're, behind closed doors, a lot of people are claiming, oh, that's just a bag seed, and they're misappropriating the word created, right, as associating with breeding. So I'm just curious your take kind of on like breeding versus bag seed and what's truly creating something.
Bag seeds, just by definition, is it just in nature, even if it's not a herm, you'll get a seed or so every once in a while in batches. If someone finds a seed in something I sold or they got, and they pop it and they put in the time and effort and it turns out to be something fire, that's theirs. You know what I mean? Does that mean they created where the seed came from or they made that lineage? No. But I do feel like as the plant moves in that direction, like certain ownership of that work goes to that person, and just through nature, you know what I mean? It's like I can't stop that. So when someone goes at, if I go and I'm like, oh, you got a seed and you did something dope with it and it's fire, it's like, a lot of time, would I breed with that? No. But do I promote and I don't actually promote? I don't mind people that actually think it's cool. If you find something and you can make something out of that, then good for you. Because we used to call that fortune cookies, like because there was cookies was unstable in the beginning and it had seeds, and we used to call that fortune cookies because if you found one of those seeds, it's like it's a fortune for you. And so I don't mind bag seeds. So that's one way someone can get a variety, a cut of a genetic that no matter how tight you hold it, it's going to get out there in one way or the other through nature and time. So when we release things or whatever, I know, okay, I have this amount of time because someone's going to find it. They're going to pop it. They're going to post it. And then they're going to start calling it what I call it. And then I got 6 months, I got a year. And then it's like, however, gelato is exploded into a million different things. And it's been 10 years. And if you look at a lot of the top nurseries and things like that still in California and these other states, gelatos are at the top of the list. Like, in terms of big large scale production even. So, there's a lot of levels. Clones, I think there's definitely like sticky hands in nurseries and workplaces. People that get paid $20 an hour and they have access to genetics that are really worth millions of dollars, and they get taken, and it's part of the deal. And a lot of these guys aren't being treated great and they don't make much money, and they see an opportunity and they, so that's one way things also get out. We sell, I don't ever really sell seeds, like there's certain little things that I do and to be able to get other varieties or genetics I want, but I've never really like focused on, I've done a few things recently, just internationally, just to really research more than anything and kind of create some relationships. But I don't see a big benefit in like selling seeds. If I put something out there, it's the real deal. It's the real gelato. I stand behind it. And, I think and I'll do regs, not just femmes. So meaning I'll have males in there too. So if I do a reg drop, people will be able to actually use the real gelato genetics to breed, and do breeding. So to speak of like breeding, to me, people can nerd out, they can do whatever. What I love about it is you could be a 5-year-old. If you put two plants in the room together, they're going to do what they're going to do. As long as the light and everything and the things are, the environment is the way it's supposed to, plants will figure it out. They're going to start flowering. They're going to, oh, this isn't right. I'm going to pollinate this. We're going to do this, And so us as humans, we can sit back and watch, and we can really kind of learn from, a lot of patience. From in the beginning, you're like, grow, and you learn a lot of patience, and you realize like me standing there staring at them for 5 hours is not going to make them grow faster. So you learn a lot of patience. So anyways, I've always been into the relationship that you with a plant, and it's done a ton for me. To go back to what we were talking about earlier, how it's evolved, the evolution for me is when I really started growing was how much the plant did for me. Yes, it was fun and it was hype and we had all that stuff, but I loved being in the garden. Some of the hardest work is like de-leafing, and sitting there on the bucket or, just doing it for hours and hours. And I would just still do it and just love all the process, of planting them, harvesting, curing, sharing, kind of falling in love with that process.
I fuck with that, man, and I appreciate you sharing your insight on that. Like you said, you said in there, right, there's been so many different variations of gelato I know that you created and other people have taken, people maybe renamed. What is, do you have like a staple that's remained your favorite out of all those cuts, or do you kind of have a current, does it change and you got a current one?
Bacho gelato, 41 is kind of, for a long time, that was like the one I rocked. And I had all the gelatos and sherbet, but the bacho I ended up growing the most of because it cloned the best. It was pretty easy to grow. It pushed out. People loved it. And so I grew that the most out of all of them. And there's been a lot of breeding done with that. And it's a really good genetic to breed with. And it's just been solid. All of the other ones I've grown. Jello is another one that's a sleeper that I'm growing now. Some people have had it, but across the country and globally, no one's had that one, and that's a consistent mid 30%. It's got a gassy bubble gum. Like when you in extracts, it literally smells like a bubble gum wrapper. I wouldn't describe it as that because the taste is, with the amount of gas it has, it really changes that. But when you smell it, it smells bubblegum wrapper, but it's incredible. She's a bitch to grow, but really good one. So all the original gelatos are, to me, acai berry, a lot of people slept on that one, but the genetics, like compound genetics, one of their first things that blew them up, they took a bag seed of acai berry and fucking bred a whole line. And that was one of the first things that they did that put them on the map like early on. And so some of these things are sleepers, and with genetics, it takes so much time to put in. It takes so much time. Even with the best of the best, a lot of the stuff gets skipped over because they're always going next generation, instead of holding on. And that's what I've done with gelato is like, okay, go ahead. The world, I'm never going to keep up with every single breeder around the world that's going to cross something or have a bag seed or have a cut. So just embrace it. And just say, hey, good job. Like if you're doing a good job, if you're passionate about it and it's making a career for you, then even better. But these are what's mine. This is what I did and I'm proud of it. And I'm going to hold on to these. And also doing a ton of breeding with good friends and people that get down and make seeds with plants that are in soil and, really with the moon and the cycles and things like that. And just, get down and realize like, with the breeding, with like global business, you can't do everything that you once did. Maybe just because you're not scrubbing, and watering and doing all the shit you once did doesn't mean that you're not still rooted in that, right? And we would all love to be in the garden every single day, but there's a ton of other shit that needs to happen if you want to grow a business. And so working with great people that, now let me pause there. I was going to get into like what we're doing globally and kind of what shifted for me. You know, if you want to go that direction.
Yeah. Well, we'll do that. But I got one more question before we get to
Sure.
tie it down with what's next. My question precursing that is, you dropped earlier the Lil Wayne bar. What's your favorite hip hop line that's name dropped one of your strains?
I mean, just what jumps out is probably Migos. She swallowed the bottle while I sit back and smoke gelato. You know, and that, I don't know if you heard, it's Calvin Harris and the Migos slide. But that was a big deal because Migos at that time were like the top fucking group. I mean, across all genres, they were probably the biggest group globally. Rest in peace, Takeoff. And with Calvin Harris, which was like the house global DJ. And so combining both of those, and that song was dope. And then the fact that they were, Gelato was just front and center in that, and I never gave them anything. That was just them. So that stands out to me. For me, that moment in time in my life, it stands out. But man, I could go on and on. People like Lil Wayne, Gelato. I mean, Lil Wayne raps really fast. Sometimes you always don't, but for those of you that don't, listen to the songs about 3/4 of the way down, but when he starts going in, it can't be any more clear. Gelato's my favorite strain. Yeah. And so is Love, and so things like this that just keep happening. Beyonce was talking about Gelato in her couple records, 6 months ago she made. Like, it's cool, and it's something that I love. It's probably like one of the greatest gifts like that, doing the work has done to me. It's like, I love the connection it constantly has, with the community.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what off top is like. Yeah, like you said, Wayne. I think I remember the Beyonce, Dolph, Migos.
Dolph.
Yeah, like
Dolph. Rest in peace, young Dolph. He was awesome, dude. I mean, for those of you that don't know, named his whole album Gelato. Yeah. Loved it. Took it to another level. People like that just because they loved the strain, not because of me, not because of whatever, my brand was like, yo, they really loved it. And so they were like, yo, this is me. This is us. It's another level, bro. When you hit something like that, and, for me, cannabis is much different than making a hit song, or I was in a movie, or I did something. This is like, still to this day, there's so much business and so many relationships that are being built through the plant, because as the industry grows and now is moving global, it's like, it's changing, but people still need genetics. People still need to be competitive. Still, all these things haven't changed. It's just at a really a lot bigger level.
No, for surely, man, for surely. So on that, getting back to it, what's kind of the future hold, and what are some of the plans for the Sherbinski brand?
We right now we're heavy just doing licensing deals with, really good cultivators, finding the best cultivators, around the country and around the world. Couple of big moves that we're going to be doing globally. The global market is opened up a lot. I was out 5, 6 years ago, running around the world, Spain, all over figuring out what's going to happen. It was just really early. Now, fast forward to where we're at, the political climate's changed, and a lot of these licenses are there. The grows are already built. Before a couple years ago, when I'd go out there, I was looking at dirt and like, oh, it's going to be a while. Now, when you go out there, like in Portugal, they got like 600-700 like indoor LED grows, all living soil. They're fucking doing it. So a lot of the work we've done, and what I'm excited about is a lot of the things we've done and the partnerships we made with Sherbinski's, these licenses and these things. You'd had to start this process like 3 years ago to go where we're taking this. And I'm excited to be able to take like some of my favorite brands like from the US and move into this next phase of where we're going with cannabis and like a lot of these other countries. And we've done all this in our own states. We've done this nationally, but now globally, it's it's a different animal, you know, and it kind of, it's sort of like for brands like myself, it's what we've prepared for. It's what we've doubled down on. And it's what the vision always was, never to be the best brand. And, you know, it's to really get our genetics and around the world and share it with people with the medicine that we believe in, and to do it in a way with class, do it in a way that's professional, answer our phone, you know what I mean? Answer our emails, you know, be good business people. And, you know, that's rare, you know, in any industry, but in the cannabis industry, especially, it's like having people that are just going to do straightforward business. So, you know, that's who we look for in license. If you're looking to do a licensing deal out there, if you hear this podcast, we're looking for some good folks, you know, to work with, good growers. Right now, we're currently in Florida. We partner with the Flowery. We're moving into New York right now with dispensaries and distribution statewide. We're in Michigan currently. We just got a deal in Arizona, California, obviously. And we are going to be doing some things in Oregon. Even with the fucked up market, there's still, shout out to everybody in Oregon, there's still some really good cultivators out there. The concentrate game is really where it's at, like the best of the best with like the concentrate. So I do want to at least be involved and I've been contributing genetics to some really good cultivators out there. So where else? Boston, Mass. We're out in Mass, dispensary out there, boutique, another company that's in our family, dispensary. For those of you in Boston area, go check out boutique. In Canada, our vapes are one of the top selling vapes in the country. We're doing really well. I mean, really well out there. Shout out to our partners out there, 14th Round. They've done an amazing job in the last couple of years to get our brand going out there. Yeah, Canada's exciting. It's you know, going there and meeting with the whole, you know, the people that the government officials really that have been appointed in every aspect from vapes to, you know, meeting with them and discussing just all the complexities of what they deal with, you know, distributing to a country. It's interesting how it's a lot of the same issues on a smaller scale. Even when you're talking about a country, a lot of the same issues. So it's just talking to them and seeing it from their point of view was interesting. So all these really just, to me, the next thing is being able to move through the EU GMP system and really work like in countries like Canada with really getting the genetics better, working with the people that are cultivating quality cannabis. And Canada's got a long ways to go, but there's a lot of groups that are funded and they're willing to do the work and get the consultation, and they're willing to bring in the good genetics. And so really focused on that. And as these other countries develop, we'll be able to move that flower into, you know, a bunch of different emerging markets. So that's really what the future is, you know, and a lot of the brands that I think I'd like to have come, I'm looking to kind of forge that path as well. And there'll be others to do it, but some of these grows are massive. So if you put together the right formula and you're able to scale that slowly, then you don't really need anybody else. You just bring the right brands that, you know, the good people that we want to bring into these other emerging markets, and, you know, and just make sure the quality control's there. And I'm excited about that. So over the next year, really dedicating a lot of time and effort to that.
Going global. Sherbinski's taking over the world with Mario, man. I really, really appreciate your time again, bro. And like I said, I can't give you enough flowers, man. I've smoked so much weed that you're responsible for as one of my favorites, if not my favorite. And so, you know, I know you get love.
Appreciate the love and having me on.
I know you get love from, you know, like I said, a lot of pop culture, but again, I still just don't feel, I genuinely don't feel like you get enough love, bro. So, yeah, just have to impart that on you. And again, appreciate your time, man.
Nah, man, things like this is all the love I need. And, you know, there's always going to be haters, but there's everywhere I go around the world, I meet people that this plant has really touched and changed. And that's more of a payoff than any hype shit. So I really appreciate you. It's good to connect with your community. Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, no doubt. This is the RMR Podcast, man. We're on all platforms. Make sure to tap in, follow, listen to another episode. Check out the website. This is episode 83. We'll be back with more soon, man. Appreciate it.